The transport ship dropped out of faster than light. Travel with a shudder that made Marcus Chun grip his seat harder than he wanted to admit. Outside the viewport, Outpost Kepler 442 hung against the black like a metal flower, its petals spinning slowly to create artificial gravity for the souls who lived and worked so far from Earth. Marcus had never been this far from home before. 3 months of travel through jump gates and hyperspace lanes, each jump taking him further from everything he knew and closer to something he desperately needed. Purpose. The woman sitting across from him was Thaxian, her blue skin covered in the geometric patterns that showed her military rank. She had introduced herself as Commander Krell when he first boarded, and she had spent most of the journey trying to convince him to turn back. Last chance, Dr. Chun, Krell said. Her forearms crossed in what Marcus had learned was the Thaxian equivalent of stern disapproval. The contested fringe is not like your core worlds out here. People die from things your fancy Earth hospitals cured centuries ago. Marcus looked down at his hand surgeon's hands, steady and precise. Hands that had once held his daughter as she died from a disease that should have been treatable. If only they had gotten to the hospital sooner. If only the war hadn't destroyed the supply lines. If only, I'm staying, Marcus said quietly. Krell made a sound like grinding rocks, which Marcus had learned meant resigned acceptance. The Thaxian had seen enough humans to know that once they made up their minds, especially about something self-destructive, there was no changing them. The docking process took 20 minutes. When the airlock finally opened, Marcus stepped into Outpost Kepler 442 and immediately understood why. Krell had tried to warn him away. The medical bay was a converted cargo hold that smelled like recycled air and desperation. The equipment was outdated by Earth standards. Some of it looked older than Marcus himself, and the waiting area was filled with species he had only seen in textbooks during his xenobiology courses. Thaxian Miner clutched an arm that bent at an unnatural angle. A Kelvin trader's environmental suit leaked atmosphere from a crack in the chest plate. Something that looked like a walking plant sat in the corner, its leaves turning brown at the edges. "Welcome to paradise," Krell said dryly, gesturing at the chaos with 2 of her arms while the other 2 worked on a datapad. "You'll be the 3rd human doctor we've had this year. The first one quit after 2 weeks. The second one died trying to save a Kelvin from radiation poisoning." Marcus set down his medical kit and immediately moved toward the waiting patients. Krell caught his arm with surprising gentleness. "First, you need to understand the rules," she said seriously. "This outpost serves everyone: pirates, traders, refugees, even the occasional war criminal seeking asylum. But there are things out here that cannot be helped. Things that will kill you if you try." She pulled up a hologram from her datapad. The image showed a creature that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was massive, 8 feet tall at the shoulder and 12 feet long from snout to tail. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and black, and its mouth was filled with teeth that looked like crystal daggers, each one easily as long as Marcus's hand. 6 eyes arranged in 3 pairs watched from the hologram with an intelligence that was somehow more terrifying than mindless hunger. "The locals call them Bloodfangs," Krell continued, her voice dropping to something almost like reverence. "They're the apex predators on the forest moon below. Their bite can shear through starship hull plating. Their blood glows in the dark because of bioluminescent bacteria in their circulatory system. And they are absolutely, without question, not to be approached under any circumstances." Marcus studied the image. He had seen predators before. Earth had its own share of dangerous animals, but something about the Bloodfang's eyes made him uneasy in a way he couldn't quite name. "How many people have they killed?" he asked. Krell's expression grew darker. "In the last 5 years? 43 confirmed death survey teams, hunters, mercenaries who thought they were tough enough. the Galactic Council declared them too dangerous for contact protocols. If you see one, you run, and you pray to whatever gods you believe in that it's already fed. She leaned closer, her voice intense. I need you to promise me, Dr. Chen, promise me that you will never, under any circumstances, approach a Bloodfang. I've lost too many people to those creatures, and I won't lose another doctor to human stubbornness. Marcus met her eyes, all four of them, and nodded. I promise. It was a lie. Though he didn't know it yet, the first 3 weeks passed in a blur of surgery and exhaustion. Marcus treated miners for lung damage caused by exotic elements, set bones for species whose skeletal structures he had to research on the fly, and once spent 14 hours synthesizing an antivenom for a trader who had been bitten by something from a planet whose name Marcus couldn't pronounce. He fell into bed each night too tired to dream, which was exactly what he wanted. Dreams meant remembering, and remembering meant seeing his daughter's face, hearing her ask why he couldn't fix her, feeling the weight of failure that had driven him to the edge of known space. But in the quiet moments between emergencies, Marcus found himself studying the reports on Bloodfang attacks. Something about the pattern bothered him with the same instinct that had made him a good trauma surgeon, the ability to see what others missed. Most of the attacks happened near Bloodfang dens. That was true. But when Marcus cross-referenced the dates with the local lunar calendar, he found something interesting. Nearly all the incidents occurred during the same 3-month period each year breeding season. The attacks weren't random hunting. They were territorial defense. The Bloodfangs weren't monsters seeking prey. They were parents protecting their young. Marcus sat in his quarters late one night. The reports spread across his desk like pieces of a puzzle he was only beginning to understand. Outside his window, the forest moon turned slowly, its surface covered in trees that grew 300 feet tall. And somewhere down there in the darkness, the Bloodfangs hunted and lived and died, labeled as monsters by every species in the sector. They're not evil, Marcus said to the empty room. They're just trying to survive, same as everyone else. He didn't know it then, but that realization would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. To see past fear and find compassion in the most unexpected places. The alarm would sound in 3 days. The Bloodfang would arrive in 4, and Marcus Chen would break his promise to Commander Krell in a way that no one, not even him, could have predicted. The alarm cut through the station like a knife through silence. Marcus was 3 hours into a surgery on a Kelvin, whose cybernetic implants had rejected when the sound made his patient jerk on the table. Security breach. Perimeter 7. The automated voice announced with mechanical calm that seemed obscene given what Marcus could hear in the background shouting. Weapons fire. Something that sounded like metal being torn apart. Krell's voice came over the communication system, tight with fear that Marcus had never heard from her before. All personnel, code black. We have a Bloodfang on station. I repeat, we have a Bloodfang on station. Security teams to Perimeter 7. Medical bay, prepare for evacuation. Marcus's hands never stopped moving. He closed the incision on his patient with practiced efficiency, sealed the wound with biogel, and signaled for the nurses to take over post-operative care. Then he was moving toward the emergency viewing station, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with terrible curiosity. The security cameras showed chaos. The Bloodfang had breached the outer perimeter near the shuttle bays, and it was massive, bigger than the hologram had suggested, its scales catching the harsh station lights and throwing back colors that shouldn't exist in nature. But something was wrong. The creature wasn't attacking. It was dragging itself forward, one leg clearly shattered, its left flank torn open by what looked like weapons fire. The kind of damage that came from illegal hunting rifles, the ones that fired rounds designed to pierce ship hulls behind it. A trail of blood glowed blue-green against the metal deck plates. each drop luminescent like a fallen star. It's heading for the medical bay, one of the security officers said, his voice shaking. Why would it kill it? Another voice shouted. And Marcus watched as 3 security personnel opened fire with pulse rifles. The Bloodfang roared a sound that Marcus felt in his bones and swatted one of the officers aside with its tail. But it didn't press the attack, didn't close its massive jaws around the fallen human. Instead, it kept moving, kept dragging itself toward the glowing blue cross that marked the medical bays. Emergency entrance Marcus understood in a moment of clarity that felt like ice water in his veins. The creature was seeking help. Stop firing. He shouted into the communication system, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of more weapons, more shouting, more chaos. The Bloodfang collapsed 50 feet from the emergency airlock. Its breathing was labored, each exhale releasing a mist that glowed faintly in the recycled air. 6 eyes tracked the movement of security personnel, but there was no rage in them, only pain and something that looked almost like Hope. Krell appeared beside Marcus at the viewing station. We need to evacuate this section, she said, already working her datapad with 2 hands while the other 2 reached for her sidearm. If it dies here, the body will block. It came here for treatment. Marcus interrupted. Krell looked at him like he had lost his mind. It's a Bloodfang, Dr. Chen. It doesn't understand the concept of treatment. It's a predator following instinct. Marcus pointed at the screen. Then why isn't it attacking? It knocked aside 1 guard and could have killed him easily. Why didn't it? Because it's injured and conserving energy. Because it knows this is a place of healing, Marcus said quietly. Look at the blood trail. It passed 3 other entrances to get here, but it came straight to medical. Somehow, it knows. He was moving before Krell could stop him. He grabbed his emergency trauma kit from its wall mount and headed for the airlock. Dr. Chen, I order you to stand down. Krell's voice followed him, but Marcus had spent his entire career ignoring orders when lives were at stake. The security officers at the airlock tried to stop him. Marcus pushed past them with the kind of strength that came from desperation and purpose. Sir, you can't go out there. Lock the door behind me, Marcus said. If this goes wrong, I don't want it getting inside. The airlock cycled. Marcus stepped through into the corridor that smelled like ozone and alien. Blood and fear. The Bloodfang's head lifted slightly. 6 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made every instinct scream at Marcus to run, to hide, to do anything except what he was about to do. Marcus held up his hands, showing them empty except for the medical kit. He spoke softly, the same voice he had used in Earth's field hospitals when treating soldiers who were more frightened than wounded. Easy, he said, taking 1 slow step forward. I know you're hurt. I can help, but you need to let me close enough to work. The Bloodfang made a sound low in its throat, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Its claws, each one as long as Marcus's forearm, scraped against the deck plates. Marcus took another step. He could see the wounds clearly now, the shattered leg bone showing through torn scales. The gaping hole in the creature's side that pulsed with each heartbeat, revealing the complex musculature beneath. Poachers, Marcus said quietly, recognizing the damage pattern. They tried to kill you for your teeth, didn't they? Another step. He was close enough now to smell the creature, something like copper and ozone mixed with an alien musk that made his eyes water. The Bloodfang could kill him so easily. 1 bite, 1 swipe of those crystalline claws, 1 thrash of that powerful tail. Security was watching from the cameras, and Marcus knew that if the creature attacked, they would open fire regardless of whether they might hit him too. He reached out slowly with 1 hand. I need to touch you to help. I promise I won't hurt you more than I have to. For a moment that stretched like eternity, nothing happened. Then the Bloodfang did something that made every person watching from safety catch their breath in disbelief. It lowered its massive head to the deck plates. Not in defeat, not in submission, but in something that looked almost like trust. 6 eyes remained fixed on Marcus, watching his every movement. But the creature went still, waiting. Marcus's hands were shaking as he opened his medical kit. He had treated wounded animals before on Earth, but never anything like this. Never something that could end his life with a thought. "Okay," he said softly, pulling out scanners and synthesizers and tools designed for a dozen different species' anatomies. "Let's see what we can do." He knelt beside the Bloodfang's ruined flank and began to work. Somewhere behind him, Commander Krell was shouting orders, and ships were already moving into position. And the galaxy was watching through cameras that would make this moment immortal. But Marcus Chen, trauma surgeon from Earth, saw only his patient, massive and terrifying and bleeding and alive in his hands, moved with the certainty of someone who had finally found what he had been searching for since his daughter died, a chance to save someone, anyone, anything. The first challenge was the shrapnel. Marcus counted 17 pieces of metal embedded in the Bloodfang's flank, each one a fragment from the illegal hunting rounds that had nearly killed the creature. "I'm going to start removing the foreign objects," Marcus said aloud, speaking to the Bloodfang as if it could understand every word. "This is going to hurt, but I need you to stay still. Can you do that for me?" The creature made a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the deck plates. Marcus chose to interpret it as agreement. His scanner showed him what he couldn't see with naked eyes. The Bloodfang had 3 hearts arranged in a triangle pattern, and one of the shrapnel pieces had lodged dangerously close to the primary cardiac chamber. If it shifted even a centimeter inward, the creature would bleed out in minutes. Marcus's hands steadied as they always did once he began working. Fear was for before and after surgery, never during. He selected the smallest piece of shrapnel first, using magnetic forceps designed for removing metal from taxia miners. The fragment came free with a wet sound, and the Bloodfang's entire body tensed, muscles bunching under scales that felt like warm stone under Marcus's gloved hands. "Easy, easy," Marcus murmured. "That's 1 down. 16 to go." An hour passed. Marcus worked with the focused intensity that had made him one of Earth's best trauma surgeons, narrating every action, partly for the security recordings, partly to keep the Bloodfang calm, partly to keep himself from thinking too hard about the impossibility of what he was doing. Creature never moved except to breathe. Occasionally, one of its 6 eyes would close slowly and reopen, like it was fighting to stay conscious. But it never flinched away, never threatened 2 hours. Marcus had cleared the shrapnel and was now working on the arterial damage. The Bloodfang's blood wasn't red like human blood or blue like Thaxian. It was something between purple and silver, and it glowed with that eerie bioluminescence that left Marcus's gloves shining in the dim corridor. "Your circulatory system is fascinating," Marcus said, using a tissue welder to seal a damaged blood vessel. "The bioluminescent bacteria must serve some kind of purpose, communication maybe? Or hunting in low light." The Bloodfang made a sound like a sigh. Marcus chose to believe it was listening. 3 hours. News had spread across the sector. Ships were arriving at the outpost, drawn by reports of the impossible thing happening in Corridor 7, a human treating a Bloodfang, the galaxy's most feared predator, lying still while alien hands worked inside its body. The communication channels were chaos. Krell had tried to clear them, but there were too many voices, too many species demanding to know what was happening. Has the human lost its mind? Why hasn't the Bloodfang killed him yet? This violates 17 different contact protocols. Someone needs to stop this before. Marcus ignored all of it. His entire world had narrowed to the area under his hands, to the steady rhythm of the Bloodfang's breathing, to the delicate work of putting a living being back together. 4 hours. The shattered leg was the hardest part. Marcus had to set the bone using a technique he had learned during Earth's last war. bracing the break with biocompatible supports that would dissolve as the bone healed. The pain must have been excruciating. The Bloodfang's claws scraped furrows in the metal deck, and a low keen escaped its throat, but it didn't pull away, didn't lash out. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "I'm so sorry, but this has to be done. You're doing so well. Just a little longer. 5 hours." Marcus synthesized antibiotics using his kit's chemical processor, adjusting the formula on instinct and xenobiology education that hadn't prepared him for this. He had no idea if the medication would work on Bloodfang physiology, but infection would kill the creature as surely as the wounds themselves. He administered the injection directly into the largest accessible blood vessel. The Bloodfang's pupils dilated, all 6 eyes showing rings of gold around black centers, and Marcus held his breath, waiting to see if he had just poisoned his patient. The eyes focused on him again. The breathing remained steady. The antibiotics were holding 6 hours. Dawn was breaking on the forest moon below. Marcus could see it through the outpost's windows, golden light spilling across trees that looked like purple columns holding up the sky. He was exhausted. His hands ached, his back screamed from being hunched over for so long, and he was covered in glowing blood that had soaked through his surgical gown and gloves. But the work was done. Marcus sat back on his heels and looked at what he had accomplished. The Bloodfang's wounds were sealed, the leg was set, the antibiotics were circulating through that magnificent triple heart system. It wasn't pretty. The creature bore the scars of its ordeal in the form of healed tissue and biogel patches, but it would live. "You're going to be okay," Marcus said. And he realized he was crying, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming weight of being trusted by something that everyone said could never trust. The Bloodfang stirred. Slowly, carefully, it lifted its massive head from the deck. Marcus scrambled backward, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he was, how easily those jaws could. The creature moved with surprising gentleness. It lowered its snout toward Marcus, stopping just inches from his chest. Marcus froze. 6 eyes watched him with that disturbing intelligence, and he could feel the heat of the Bloodfang's breath against his face. It smelled like ozone and something sweet he couldn't identify. Then the creature did something that no one watching could quite believe. It touched its snout to Marcus's chest, directly over his heart, once, twice, 3 times. Each touch deliberate and careful. Marcus understood. He didn't know how he understood, but he did. This was communication, acknowledgement, something that transcended language. "You're welcome," Marcus whispered. The Bloodfang pulled back. It tested its treed leg, putting weight on it slowly. The biosupports held. It took 1 step, then another, then turned toward the emergency airlock that led to the shuttle. Base security had opened the outer doors, whether out of wisdom or fear. Marcus couldn't say. The Bloodfang paused at the threshold. 6 eyes looked back at Marcus one final time, and in that gaze he saw something that made his breath catch. Recognition, understanding, maybe even gratitude. Then it was gone, limping into the shuttle bay, and from there down to the forest moon below, leaving behind only the glowing blood trail and the impossible memory of what had just happened. Krell found Marcus still sitting on the deck plates. She crouched beside him with her 4 arms wrapped around herself, a gesture of deep uncertainty. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen," she said quietly. "And the bravest?" Marcus looked at his hands. They were steady again, the surgeon's calm returning now that the work was done. "It trusted me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Everyone said they were monsters, but it came here for help, and it trusted me." Krell was silent for a long moment. "The galaxy is going to lose its mind over this," she finally said. "You know that, right? You violated every contact protocol, every safety regulation. The Council is going to demand answers." Marcus stood slowly. Every muscle in his body protested. "Let them demand," he said. "I'm a doctor." When something is dying and comes to me for help, I don't care if it's human or Thaxian or the galaxy's most feared predator, I help. Above them, in orbit and across the sector, ships were already broadcasting the footage. The image of a human kneeling beside a Bloodfang, working with gentle hands to heal wounds that others had inflicted. The image of trust where everyone said there could only be fear, the image that would change everything. The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 12 hours, every major news network was showing the same images. Dr. Marcus Chun, human trauma surgeon, kneeling beside a Bloodfang while his hands worked to save a life that every other species had written off as too dangerous to approach. The response was immediate, and divided Earth's networks celebrated. They showed footage of their own history, humans approaching injured wolves, nursing wounded tigers back to health, rehabilitating predators that should have killed them. "This is what we do," one commentator said proudly. "We see past the teeth and claws to the pain beneath." The other species were less enthusiastic. The Thaxian Assembly called it reckless endangerment. The Kelvin Confederacy declared it a violation of the Galactic Council's contact protocols. The Hive Collective simply asked, why would any being risk death for a creature that cannot offer alliance? But other voices began to emerge, quieter at first. Then, growing louder, a Thaxian miner came forward with a story about a human medic who had crawled into a collapsed tunnel to treat him when everyone else had given up. A Kelvin trader shared footage of a human rescue worker diving into a radiation leak to pull out survivors. Species after species began sharing their encounters with humans who did impossible things for beings they barely knew. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Humans saw wounded creatures where others saw threats. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. They demanded that Marcus appear before them to answer for his actions. Krell tried to argue on his behalf, but the Council was unmoved. Protocols existed for a reason, and this human had violated too many to ignore. Marcus arrived at the Council station 2 weeks after the incident. He had spent the time gathering data, running analysis, preparing for what he knew would be a fight. The council chamber was vast. Delegates from 40 species sat in a circular arrangement, looking down at where Marcus stood in the center. The air smelled like a dozen different atmospheres mixing poorly, and the translation devices created a constant background. The Thaxian delegate spoke first. "Dr. Marcus Chun, you stand accused of reckless endangerment, violation of contact protocols, and unauthorized interaction with a species classified as extremely dangerous. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Marcus said simply. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. The Kelvin delegate leaned forward, her environmental suit hissing as it adjusted. "You deny that you approached the Bloodfang in violation of all established safety protocols?" "I don't deny my actions," Marcus clarified. "I deny that they were reckless. I'm a trauma surgeon. When a patient seeks treatment, I provide it. The Bloodfang came to the medical bay seeking help. Refusing treatment would have violated my oath as a physician. The creature is not sentient," the Hive Collective representative stated, its voice buzzing through a translation matrix. "It cannot seek treatment because it lacks the cognitive capacity to understand the concept." Marcus pulled out his datapad. "May I present evidence?" The council exchanged glances. The lead arbiter, a being whose species Marcus didn't recognize, gestured permission. "I've analyzed every reported Bloodfang attack over the past 50 years, Marcus began, projecting data onto the chamber's central display. "There are 317 incidents total. Of those, 43 resulted in deaths, which proves our point," the Thaxian delegate interrupted. "These creatures are deadly. Let me finish," Marcus said firmly, and something in his voice made the chamber go quiet. Of those 43 fatal incidents, 39 occurred when security forces opened fire first. The Bloodfangs were defending themselves. He changed the display. "Now look at the locations of attacks. I've overlaid them with the positions of medical facilities, ships broadcasting medical frequencies, and locations with active healing technology. The pattern was undeniable. The incidents clustered around places of healing. They're not attacking, Marcus said quietly. They're seeking help. They've learned somehow that certain places, certain frequencies, certain symbols mean healing. When they're injured, they go to those places. Impossible, the Kelvin delegate said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled up more data. I've also cross-referenced the timing of incidents with the Bloodfang breeding cycle. 73% of encounters happen during the 3-month period when females are protecting dens. These aren't random attacks. They're parents defending their young from what they perceive as threats. He looked around the chamber. Every species in this council has done the same thing at some point in their evolution, protected their children, sought healing when injured. Why do we assume the Bloodfangs are different? Because they're animals, the Hive representative stated. So were dogs once, Marcus countered, and cats, and horses. My species has a long history of finding kinship with predators. We learn to read their body language, understand their needs, see past the threat to the being beneath. He changed the display again. This time, it showed the security footage of the Bloodfang approaching the medical bay, bleeding, limping, but not attacking even when fired upon. Look at this creature's behavior, Marcus said. It passed 3 other entrances to reach medical. It knocked aside one guard, but didn't kill him when it easily could have. It sat down and waited for treatment, even though every instinct should have told it to fight or flee. The chamber was silent. That's not animal behavior, Marcus continued. That's intelligence, trust, understanding. The Bloodfang knew I could help, and it chose to let me. How many of your species would make that same choice? The lead arbiter spoke for the first time. Even if what you say is true, you still violated protocols. Those protocols exist to protect lives. Protocols that are based on incomplete information, Marcus argued. You labeled the Bloodfangs as too dangerous for contact because every species that encountered them saw them as threats first. No one ever tried to see them as patients, because approaching them is suicide. The Thaxian delegate said. Marcus met her eyes. It was suicide for your species, for the Kelvin, for the Hive, but humans evolved alongside predators. We learned to distinguish between a creature that's hunting and one that's hurt. That's not recklessness, that's skill. He took a breath. You want to charge me with endangerment? Fine, but understand that if you make it illegal for humans to practice medicine the way we know how, you'll lose the only species willing to treat anyone who walks through our doors, pirate or politician, ally or enemy. We don't care about faction or protocol when someone is dying. The silence stretched. Delegates consulted with each other in whispers and clicks and humming frequencies. Finally, the lead arbiter spoke. The charges of reckless endangerment are dismissed, she said. And Marcus felt relief flood through him. However, Dr. Chung, you are hereby prohibited from any further contact with the Bloodfang species. The Council cannot risk creating a precedent that might encourage others without your unique perspective to attempt similar interactions. It was a compromise. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood. This session is adjourned. Marcus left the chamber. Krell was waiting outside, her forearms crossed. That could have gone worse, she said. Could have gone better. Marcus replied, what neither of them knew, what no one could have predicted, was that the galaxy's understanding of the Bloodfangs had already begun to shift. Xenobiologists were requesting access to study them through non-invasive means. Conservationists were demanding protection for their breeding grounds. And most importantly, other humans were watching and learning. The footage of Marcus treating the Bloodfang had become required viewing in medical schools across human space. Professors used it to teach the Chun protocol approach with healing intent, speak calmly, trust that most beings would choose life over violence when given the chance, and on Outpost Kepler 442. Marcus returned to his work, saving lives one surgery at a time, never knowing that his time with the Bloodfangs wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 months passed. Marcus fell back into the rhythm of frontier medicine, treating miners, patching up traders, occasionally saving someone who probably didn't deserve saving, but got saved anyway, because that was what doctors did. Incident with the Bloodfang had made him famous. Ships came to Outpost Kepler 442 specifically to be treated by the human who tamed a Bloodfang, though Marcus always corrected them. He hadn't tamed anything. He had simply offered help and been trusted enough to give it. Krell noticed that Marcus spent his rare free time studying the forest moon below. He had downloaded every piece of research on Bloodfang behavior, learned their hunting patterns, their social structures, their life cycle. You know, the council banned you from contact, Krell reminded him one evening as they shared a meal in the station's common area. I'm just reading, Marcus said. But his eyes held a distant look that made Krell uneasy. She knew that look. She had seen it on humans before, right before they did something magnificently stupid and impossibly brave. The alarms woke Marcus from a dreamless sleep. His first thought was that the station was under attack. But the emergency code was different, not a breach, not a fire. Something else entirely. He pulled up the security feed on his room's display and felt his heart stop. They sat in perfect formation outside the medical bay, 17 Bloodfangs, arranged in a semicircle around the emergency entrance. Their scales caught the station's lights and threw back colors, like oil on water, purples and blacks and deep blues that seemed to shift with each breath. Security was mobilizing, but no one was firing. After what had happened with Marcus, protocols had changed. Observe first. Shoot only if attacked. Marcus was moving before he fully understood what he was doing. He grabbed his medical kit and ran through the corridors. His bare feet slapping against cold metal. Krell intercepted him outside the medical bay. Don't, she said simply, all four arms outstretched to block his path. They came here for a reason, Marcus said. You don't know that they could be hunting or territorial. Look at them. Marcus pointed to the security feed. They're not attacking. They're waiting, and they were. 17 massive predators sat motionless, their 6 eyes all fixed on the medical bay entrance. Like supplicants at a temple, Marcus saw which one sat at the front of the group. He recognized the scar pattern on its flank, the one he had treated, the one he had saved. Beside it sat a smaller Bloodfang. It was young, maybe a quarter the size of the adult, and even through the grainy security footage, Marcus could see that something was wrong. It lay on its side, breathing in rapid, shallow gasps. The young one is sick, Marcus said. Quietly, Krell looked at him. You can't know that from, look at the breathing pattern. The way it's positioned, that's respiratory distress, Marcus interrupted, his medical training overriding everything else. They brought it here for treatment, Marcus, Krell said, and her voice was gentle in a way he had never heard before. If you go out there, the council will. I don't care what the council does, Marcus said, meeting her eyes. That's a sick child and a parent asking for help. What would you have me do? Krell held his gaze for a long moment. Then all 4 of her arms dropped to her sides. I can't protect you from this, she said. I'm not asking you to. The airlock cycled. Marcus stepped out into the night air. The station's atmospheric shield allowed for an open viewing area, and the Bloodfangs had gathered there under a sky filled with stars. Marcus didn't recognize 17 pairs of 6 eyes turned to watch him. Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he kept walking. The adult Bloodfang, his patient from 2 months ago, rose to its full height. In the dim light, Marcus could see the healed scars on its flank where the shrapnel had torn through. The creature took 1 step forward. Marcus stopped, waiting. Then it did something that made every person watching from safety catch their breath. It lowered its head and touched its snout to Marcus's chest. Once, twice, 3 times, the same gesture it had made before Marcus reached out slowly and placed his hand on the Bloodfang's snout. The scales were warm, almost hot to the touch. "You remember me," he said softly. The Bloodfang pulled back and turned toward the small form lying on the ground. It made a sound, a low, keening call that was unmistakably apparent in distress. Marcus moved to the young Bloodfang. The other adults parted to let him through, creating a path like an honor guard. The youngling's breathing was worse than he had thought. He could hear fluid in the lungs, see the blue tinge to the gums that meant oxygen deprivation. Without treatment, it would be dead by morning. "Pneumonia," Marcus said aloud. Pulling out his scanner, or the Bloodfang equivalent, aggressive infection in the respiratory system, he looked up at the 17 massive predators surrounding him. Any one of them could kill him in seconds, all of them watching as he examined their young. The weight of their trust was almost crushing. "I can help," Marcus said, "but I'll need to give injections. And it's going to hurt. I need you all to stay calm." He synthesized antibiotics, adjusted the dosage for the youngling's smaller mass, and loaded the injection device. The young Bloodfang whimpered when he administered it, and every adult in the circle tensed. Marcus kept speaking softly, explaining every action. "This will fight the infection. I'm also going to clear the fluid from the lungs. This is the part that will hurt the most." He had to intubate, a procedure he had done 1,000 times on a dozen different species, but never on a Bloodfang. His hands were steady as he worked, clearing the fluid. Ensuring the airways were open, the youngling coughed a wet, terrible sound, but then its breathing eased, deepened, became more regular. Marcus sat back. "The antibiotics will take a few hours to work fully, but it should recover. Keep it warm. Make sure it drinks plenty of water." He stopped. He was giving care instructions to 17 apex predators, who probably didn't understand a word he was saying, but the adult Bloodfang his patient touched its snout to his chest again. Then it turned to the youngling and made a soft trilling sound. The small one stirred, lifted its head slightly. The parent looked back at Marcus with all 6 eyes. In that gaze, Marcus saw understanding that transcended language, gratitude, recognition, trust. Then the adult did something new. It reached up with one massive claw and carefully, deliberately, worked loose one of its crystalline teeth. The tooth came free with a crack that made Marcus flinch. But the Bloodfang showed no pain. It placed the tooth at Marcus's feet. The other 16 adults did the same. One by one, they shed a single tooth, a voluntary gift that would have cost poachers their lives to take. 17 crystalline teeth lay in a semicircle around Marcus. In the illegal markets, they would be worth millions. Here, in this moment, they represented something far more valuable. Trust. Marcus looked at the fortune at his feet and then at the beings who had given it. "I can't accept," but the adult Bloodfang had already turned away. It carefully lifted the youngling in its jaws, gentle despite those razor teeth, and the entire group began to move toward the forest below. They paused at the edge of the landing platform. 17 massive forms silhouetted against the starlight. Then they were gone, disappearing into the trees like shadows returning to darkness. Crow found Marcus still standing among the teeth. She looked at the gift, at him, at the empty space where the Bloodfangs had been. "The council is going to lose their minds," she said finally. "Let them." Marcus replied. Ships were already arriving. News of the gathering had spread even faster than the first footage. Within hours, scientists, diplomats, and the simply curious would descend on the outpost, but for now, in the quiet before the chaos, Marcus Chun stood, alone with 17 crystalline teeth that represented the most important discovery in the galaxy's history. Not that the Bloodfangs could be tamed, or controlled, or used, but that they could choose, could trust, could recognize healing intent across the vast gulf between species. The galaxy had spent centuries trying to survive, to defend, to separate themselves from anything that seemed dangerous. It took humans with their strange instinct to approach the wounded, to see past the teeth and claws to the pain beneath, to show that sometimes the greatest threat wasn't the predator, it was the fear that kept you from seeing what they really needed. Marcus bent down and carefully collected the teeth. He would give them to xenobiologists, let them study the gift. But he kept one for himself, a reminder of the moment when 17 apex predators trusted him with their most precious thing, their young. The next morning, Marcus was back in surgery, treating a Kelvin trader's radiation burns. Krell entered the medical bay and watched him work for a moment before speaking. "The Galactic Medical Association wants to create a new position," she said. "Xenological crisis medicine. They want humans to fill most of the roles." Marcus didn't look up from his patient. "Because we're the only ones crazy enough to try?" "Because you're the only ones who see patients instead of threats," Krell corrected. "They're calling it the Chun Protocol approach with healing intent. Speak calmly. Trust that most beings will choose life over violence when given the chance." Marcus finished sealing the radiation burns. "Will the council allow it? After last night?" Krell made her grinding rocks laugh. "The Bloodfangs made the choice for them. If apex predators can recognize human healers, then maybe there's something to your approach after all."